behavior. We got involved, we built clubs, we rebuilt central committees. My own county party hadn't knocked on a door as the county party organization in a decade when we got involved, right? And we built field operations and we built coalitions. And we flipped Santa Barbara County from purple to solidly blue. And we elected more women and more people of color than have ever been elected in the history of the county. But more importantly, I think, we built an organization that was out there not just to elect people with D's next to their name, but to hold those elected officials accountable. Which is exactly the work that you've been doing as a community of activists here in Indivisible and here in your community, is figuring out where are those levers of power that can amplify our voices as activists, not just to give people jobs in legislatures, but to make sure that they're going to vote with their conscience, with people, with our platform, with our values. So one of the first things we did as a county party was became the first county party in the state to adopt a county party platform that then we use to assess which candidates we've been running for. Because at the end of the day, and I'm going to close with this and take questions, the thing that I love about the Democratic Party, the thing that sets it apart from just going and volunteering on campaigns directly, or like I did for 10 years being a grassroots rank and file trade union activist in my union, rising up to become local union president. The thing that sets it apart is that here, in addition to doing the hard work of turning out the vote, we debate and we decide and we struggle over what it means to be a Democrat. And regular people get to participate in that process. So when we fight it out and decide who we're going to endorse for mayor, who we're going to endorse for school board, for water board, for county supervisor, where do they stand on issues of environmental protection, social justice, standing up for immigrants, standing up for women's bodily autonomy? When we decide which Democrats are better than others, what we're doing is really the hard democratic work of deciding democratically what it means to be a Democrat. That's why I love this party. My first convention 15 years ago, watching this floor debate about some ballot proposition, I don't even remember which, and watching people line up behind the microphones to speak, and there was a state senator on one side, a grassroots activist on the other, a retiree and a student, a trade unionist, and a disability rights activist, all mixing it up, throwing elbows, to decide what it meant to be a Democrat. I'm running for chair because I have the most experience of anyone running in building party organizations that empower regular people on the ground in their communities to make social change. And I appreciate your support and your attention. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we have time for a couple questions, so queue up here if you have any questions. Go for it, Carol.
Hi, Daraka. Can you tell us about the budget for the state party, as well as what are your priorities for spending money, and will you make sure that the budget is transparent?
Yes, excellent question. So first of all, we haven't passed a real operating budget as a state party in any kind of transparent way since I've been a state party officer, 6 years, right? The budget is the most hidden away, obfuscated part of what we do. And that's why, in this race, a lot of candidates have made a lot of promises about what we're going to spend money on that I don't think are really very sustainable. The fact is, the vast majority that's spent in politics, including money that is raised into the party and then spent out, is actually controlled by elected officials. The trick is figuring out how to leverage that expenditure. So, for example, all over this state, we have these amazing campaigns, right, to flip congressional seats especially, but also to flip legislative seats. We spent millions of dollars, some of which went through the party, most of which stayed outside of the party. But we had thousands of volunteers a day out knocking on doors, talking to people about congressional elections. But in way too many of those coordinated efforts, we did nothing for our down ticket. Nothing for our county supervisor. Nothing for school board. Nothing for water board. And not only is that asinine in terms of party building for the future and electing our bench for the next time, as you all know as local activists, decisions are made at those levels of government that are literally life or death issues. For our homeless population, whether you have reactionary Republicans sitting on a city council or progressives who want to do something about it, can make the difference of whether someone freezes to death or not. We have to be electing people at every level. We're not doing that now. So my number one priority is using all of that experience I've had of what I call, it's not just herding cats in the Democratic Party, it's herding cats with little tiny switchblades. But getting everybody to the table to say that from an activist point of view, it has to be one-stop shopping. Someone needs to be able to pick up the phone, call a headquarters, go online, come into a headquarters and be able to fight for democratic values at the presidential level and all the way down to school boards and water boards. And we're not doing that effectively. That will be our number one priority if I'm chair.
Hi, Daraka. I have two questions. Okay, first question is, so I was recently elected as a delegate, so I'll be voting this weekend. And I think something that I've heard among younger delegates across the state, people that I'm friends with or, Facebook pages with or whatnot, people are concerned that the party hasn't done a good enough job to date of getting young people to feel like they have a voice at the table. Specifically, an example I can point to is the ADM process itself. It's very expensive to be a delegate. It's expensive to run. It's expensive to go to convention. And for people who are in their 20s typically, and people all low income people, of course, but people who are my age, typically are lower income at the start of their career. I want to know what you plan to do to make not just the party more inclusive, but the ADM process more inclusive for low-income young people. We know that obviously there's a correlation between wealth in the state and where you're born, what your zip code is, and so we want to make sure that we're reaching all these people. So what's your commitment to that?
Yeah. So the big challenge with lowering the cost of participation obviously are like the hard costs of union hotel facilities, the fact that we have limited places in the state where we could do it, the fact that conventions cost a hell of a lot of money. And a lot of our donors are like, they want to give money to field campaigns and to electing people, not necessarily for us to have shindigs, as they see it, right? That's unfortunate because they don't see the importance of that internal building and internal democratic process. But right away, something we can do is to establish a solidarity fund that asks everyone who's registering for convention, if they can, put $5 more on top of it, $10, $20, whatever they can afford. And they will have a fund to be able to give scholarships to people based on need. And those, we know that scholarship, like the difference between a convention costing $600 total and costing $400 total, might be the difference that somebody can go out and they can fundraise $400 from their peer network and family, but not $600, and that can make the difference for participation. So that's one very concrete step we can do right away. In terms of, in general, empowering young people, I'm very proud of the record we have in Santa Barbara. The campus Democrats at UCSD have the national record 3 election cycles in a row for registering the most young people to vote and turning out the most young people to vote in the election. And that has been a painstaking program that we've built with generations of youth leadership in that chapter. And my general approach is this. Young people are not like larval Democrats waiting to become eventually important. This phrase of that like young people are the future, I just find insulting. I was a young Democrat when I was elected chair of my county party, and I remember that pat on the head being very patronizing. Young people are here now, and they're part of the community now, and they have issues now. So my approach has always been to provide the space and resources and infrastructure for young people to do peer-to-peer organizing on issues that are important to young people in campaigns that are framed and led by young people. And that's what I'll be looking to do as chair.
I like that, thank you. And then the second question, so obviously...
I'll try to be quicker next time.
Okay, sorry. Obviously you know that there has been some controversy around the last chair election, and specifically the role you may or may not have played in particular accusations of sexual harassment, sexual assault, these kinds of things. Yeah. And so obviously there's been things that have kind of gone around in niche media publications and what have you, and I kind of want to just maybe give you the opportunity to address that up front.
First, just to say, in case there's people who are not so familiar with some of this, there's no accusations that I have sexually harassed anyone or anything close to that.
Sorry, I didn't frame that properly.
So I was approached, starting at the last executive board meeting in Long Beach in the fall, I was approached by staff and activists of the CDP with harrowing, credible, and corroborated stories of abuse and sexual assault by Chair Bowman. Over the course of the next week and a half or 2 weeks, I spoke to about 20 people. The actions that I took at that point was to connect those survivors with a trusted journalist who we decided would put their stories first and not make this a political gossip story. So a majority of them spoke with that journalist, and I filed charges against Chairman Bowden within our own internal system, which is totally inadequate for dealing with these issues. It's a far too public and politicized process, but it was the only one we had. So I filed those charges and called on him to resign. After his resignation, a growing number of survivors have been suing the party. One of the litigants felt that when she came to me, and keep in mind, when she came to me about her stories of harassment, I believed her, I told her I believed her, and I filed charges. She also came with a complaint about the choice of attorney that the party made, which I had nothing to do with. I explained to her that I had nothing to do with it, that I wished her luck with dealing with that issue, and that she should talk to an attorney. I was raised by attorneys, but I'm not an attorney, and so my mantra always when people have an issue like this is find a real attorney and talk to that attorney. That was what I felt the best advice I could give. She interpreted it differently, and in her lawsuit characterized it differently, and that's unfortunate, but it is the way it is.
Appreciate you being here.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Hi, thanks for being here today. So I want to follow up on the question regarding the lawsuits against CDP. So could you tell us more about it? What's the status at this point? And what kind of safeguards, if you're elected as chair, that you will implement so that we will avoid this kind of problems?
Excellent. So I don't know more than what has been publicized in terms of the status of the lawsuits, in terms of like any kind of settlement discussion or anything. I'm not privy to those discussions. One of the things I think it's been hard for people to wrap their head around is how uninvolved in issues like that all of the officers are except the chair. This is an incredibly overly centralized organization, which is why my reform, part of my platform, a lot of the things I'm proposing is about more accountability and spreading out the responsibilities of the chair. Right now it is way, way, way too centralized. With that in mind, I think that every delegate should sign a legally binding code of conduct that's developed as a community about their behavior, because the toxicity and abuse that happens in this party isn't just one faction to another or top to bottom, it's in every combination and club member to club member, etc. I think that we need an ombudsman who's independent from the chair, who can help anyone navigate the procedures for filing and dealing with a complaint. And I think that we need a new process for bringing allegations against an officer, a staff person, or a fellow activist. And we're going to need input from experts in that area to develop something that fits this party. We're a largely volunteer-led organization. We're an organization in which people do not fit into binary categories of gender. And so we need a culturally competent, political, progressive process for figuring out how we can keep people safe in the organization.
Thank you.
Do you want to ask one last question before we break out? You have 2 minutes. Do it.
Hi, I'm James. I'm an agent.
Hey, Jane.
I have a question about labor.
Yeah.
I'm not a union person, but in your kind of feeling, do you feel that the Democratic Party in California's relationship to labor is perfect as it is? There should be stronger, or there should be effort to get more people that aren't in labor involved? What is your feeling about it?
So first, I come out of a labor background, as I said, and also a democratic socialist political background. I think that everyone should have union representation. I think that every job category that there is, if you pull in a paycheck, you should have a union and the right to sit down and negotiate as an equal with your boss. I think that the relationship between the Democratic Party and the labor movement should be strengthened but changed. Right now, unfortunately, it's often very transactional, very top-down, and really just about big checks. So, we're the union, we don't really engage with the party, we don't send our members to party organizations or get them involved in the grassroots, we just write checks to candidates or write checks to the party, and therefore want to decide what happens, right? Like a donor-donee relationship. What we need is an organic relationship. We need labor activists being involved in clubs, being involved in campaigns, running for office themselves, so that when we're working alongside each other, we learn more about, like labor folks learn about what brings, the environmental aspects or gender justice or racial justice things that bring people to the Democratic Party. And let's be honest, like some of our middle class base that's never, been around the labor movement learns what the labor movement is, how it works, what it isn't, and gets through some of the mythology. So I want it to be stronger, but more organic and grassroots.
Linda, do you have a follow-up?
I didn't know, it's not a follow-up, it's a different question. What you've got here is some people that are part of a Democratic club, but an awful lot of people that are purely grassroots for whatever reason that they choose to be grassroots. Although all of us have worked our butts off to get Democrats elected and to do the hard work.
Yeah.
And I think that there are an awful lot of these kinds of groups out there. We've tried to connect with our Democratic committee in the Santa Clara Valley, and it's been a little bit challenging. Where they're starting to trust us a little bit, but here's the thing: you've got a lot of bodies and a lot of people who really care. How are you going to use all of us? How are you going to communicate with us? How are you going to excite us? How are you going to point us in the right direction in the next year so that we can get out of this awful mess we're in?
Excellent. So a lot there. So I actually, I'm going to try my best to be as brief as possible without geeking out too much. But I actually wrote my PhD dissertation on the California Democratic Party and how social movements and groups just like this have transformed it over the last 60 years. So this is like what I wake up in the morning thinking I'm just a total dork for. And the fact is that you go all the way back, like how did the Burtons get involved in the Democratic Party? Well, they started out, they were raw, super excited about this young upstart presidential candidate named Adlai Stevenson, who ran and didn't win, but all over the country, his acolytes got involved in the party, started clubs. The Burtons got their start in the San Francisco Young Democrats, ran to try to take over their central committee like 8 times, never succeeded. But these kinds of struggles at the grassroots, it's not abnormal. I think, unfortunately, we talk about this like, oh, the Bernie people came in and now they're struggling with the powers that be, as if that's a new thing. No, this is the cycle, is the circle of life, right, of the Democratic Party. So my thing is, I don't want to use you. I want to help build strong clubs and central committees, work with them to make sure that they understand that getting new people in is life's blood and that they're shooting themselves in the foot by not being welcoming, but also providing things like handbooks and apps and tools for new people to come in to learn how the structure works. I don't want to use you, I want to organize you. I want to empower you, I want to give you the tools you need to be more effective in the party and therefore more effective through the party into society.
But not all of us will ever be in the party.
Not all of us will ever be any.
Right.
We're Democrats.
So, and we're Greens, and we're
Sure,
Libertarians,
sure.
we're all kinds of...
And my point is, you would have a chair who could make the case until people are just overwhelmed with information to any young, old, new, seasoned activist about why the Democratic Party and building the party is a very worthwhile task. I will make that case to anyone who will listen, but I also understand that not everyone's going to buy it.
All right, guys.
I think it takes a lot of your time.
You're good. Let's give them a round of applause.